Today we're talking about the Israelites' Exodus from Egypt. Is this a completely legendary tale, or is there a certain historical reality behind one of the most powerful stories in Jewish tradition? That is what we will discuss with our guest on this episode of Talk in the Library.
You're listening to Talk in the Library, a National Library of Israel podcast.
Welcome to Talk in the Library. My name is Shai Ben-Ari. Our guest today is Israel Knohl, who was the Yechezkel Kaufman Professor of Biblical Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and today is a Senior Fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute. He has served as a visiting professor at UC Berkeley, Stanford University, and Harvard University, among others, and has published 12 books. A note on today's episode. When discussing events that may have happened over 3,000 years ago, and for which there is very little proof either way, we are necessarily dealing with very few cold, hard facts. Therefore, today's talk will focus primarily on theories and possibilities. I'll also note that we will be discussing the story of the Exodus and the possible events from a historical perspective and not a religious one. We encourage you to listen with an open mind. Enjoy the conversation. So, Professor Israel Knohl, thank you very much for being with us today. I'd like to begin with an Egyptian pharaoh, the name of an Egyptian pharaoh who is perhaps not the one we would usually associate with the Exodus. I'm talking about Pharaoh Merneptah, who is also you wouldn't be described as the most significant pharaoh in Egyptian history, but he is very famous for one thing that he wrote almost as an afterthought. Around the year 1208, he's believed to have written or inscribed the sentence, "Israel is laid waste, his seed is no more," on a stele that he erected in Egypt. And this is a remarkable sentence for many reasons. But perhaps the most remarkable is this mention of Israel. That's the first mention of Israel anywhere. Not just in the archaeological record, this is before the Bible. This is before even the stories of the Bible. Most of them are supposed to have even taken place. It's before the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. It's before the prophets. Yet here, around 1200 BC, we have mention of Israel, not in a positive sense. We're talking about the destruction of Israel, and here we are today speaking in Jerusalem. So obviously, it did not come to pass. But what can you tell us about this conflict very early on between Pharaoh Merneptah and the people of Israel?
Pharaoh Merneptah was the 11th son of a great pharaoh, Ramses II, who ruled almost all the time of the 13th century BC. Probably, Ramses II is the pharaoh who enslaved Israel in Egypt, because in the story of Exodus, it is said, "Vayive nare miskenot leFaro et Pitom ve'et Ramses."
I'll just translate that.
Yes.
So they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built garrison cities for Pharaoh, Pitom, and Ramses.
Yes. So the building of a city named Ramses is actually associated with Ramses II. Mm-hmm. This is the new capital that he built in northern Egypt, and he gave it his name, Pir Ramses, the house of Ramses. So he is the father of Merneptah. He is the one who enslaved Israel, and according to the biblical story, he was the one who was troubled by the presence of the Israelites in Egypt and wanted to ruin them. Mm. And he's the first one who spoke in the Bible about the people of Israel. Because before that, in the book of Exodus, they are the sons of Jacob or the sons of Israel, not the people of Israel. But he says, "Hinei am bnei Israel ra ve'atzum mimenu." Behold, the people of Israel is growing to a huge number. It's too
nation.
much.
Right.
It's too much for us.
Mm-hmm.
So the archaeology and the Bible are talking at the same voice, the first mention of the people of Israel, both in the Bible and in archaeology, is by pharaohs who want to destroy them or claims that they already have destroyed them. And yet we are here. This is the amazing fact.
So certainly there's another side to the story. Okay, so we have this conflict that apparently, at least Merneptah describes, happening around 1200 BC, a little before. You argue, and we'll get into this, that conflict between Egypt and Israel happens before the event of the Exodus. And you also argue that when Merneptah battles against Israel, he is battling against the majority of the Israelite tribes, and you speak of a minority group that later on would find itself in Egypt. Not the whole people, but a group, and we'll get into exactly who those are.
Yes, let me build it from the inscription and also based on the story in the Bible. Because as it is written in the Bible, the enslaving Pharaoh, according to our understanding, Ramses II passed away. And only in the life of his son, Merneptah, they went out. This is the story of the book of Exodus. And then they wandered for 40 years in the desert.
We should mention that the Bible never really names the Pharaoh, besides the mention of the city.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But if you make the calculation, it would come that they arrived in Canaan around, I would say, 1170, something like this. Yet, as you said, in 1208, Merneptah is describing a war in the land of Canaan. He fought against 3 cities, Ashkelon, Gezer. Gezer is near the Ben Gurion Airport.
Central Israel.
And Yenoam, which is somewhere near the Sea of Galilee. And then he said, I have had a fight against the tribe of Israel. They have no sign of a city, but rather as an ethnic group, the ethnic group of Israel. And I have laid them west. And there's no seed in the sense of descendants. No more descendants to Israel. But this is at least 40 years before the time of the Exodus, according to the biblical story. So, for sure, we have to understand that there were 2 groups of ancient Israel. A group which was already there in the land of Canaan in the time of Merneptah, and another group which was enslaved in Egypt.
Right. So, when we talk about an Israelite presence in ancient Egypt, there is basically nothing in the archaeological record that would amount to scientific proof, certainly. But within the biblical text, there are many hints, we can say, that are very interesting in this respect. The story of slavery and bondage in Egypt has a certain authentic ring to it, precisely because you have people who are not glorifying their own history here when they speak of being enslaved. Often when nations tell their own story, they tend to exaggerate the glory. But here, story is one of slavery, very lowly beginnings.
Yes.
Does that mean it is authentic, that story of slavery?
I think so, because as you said, otherwise, if it's not an authentic story, at least for part of the people, why telling a story about your origins as slaves? It's not give you an heroic image. So we have to, I think, accept that at least part of the ancient Israel was enslaved in Egypt in connection with the building projects of Ramses II. And we have to understand the time, and we have to understand the conditions of the time to understand what was this enslavement, what was it for, what were the general conditions of the period. And this will help us to build a better picture of the group who was enslaved in Egypt.
We do have certain evidence, let's call it, from Egyptian records and inscriptions that refer not necessarily to the Israelites, but to groups coming from the region of Canaan or maybe Transjordan, heading south towards Egypt. Around this time, we should mention, this is a time of great upheaval. We're more or less talking about the time of the Bronze Age collapsed. Hunger spreads across the Eastern Mediterranean. You have reports of invasions from the Sea Peoples. We'll probably get into that. Political upheaval across the region. And as a result of all this, maybe even natural disaster. As a result of all of this, you have also scarcity of food. And this drives the movement of people. And we have some evidence of movement in that direction from Canaan or Transjordan towards Egypt. What can you tell us about that?
Yes. As you just said, the period that we are talking about is the period of the transition between the Bronze Age and the beginning of the Iron Age, around the year 1200s BCE. It's a huge climate crisis. People are talking now about our time. Do we have climate crisis or not?
Right.
Definitely then there was climate crisis. You know, we know it from biologists to check development of several plants, and they can see that there was no rain for long period, or not enough rain for long period. We have letters. The Hittite Empire in Anatolia, a huge empire, they are starving to death, and they send letters to Merneptah, asking him, please, Merneptah, we know that you have corn in Egypt. We are dying, we are starving. Send us any quantity that you can with ships, and we will pay you. You will save our life. He sent, but it was not enough. And the Hittite Empire collapsed and never came back. This was the end of the great Hittite Empire. And people were leaving their houses in Greece, in the other areas around Greece, and these are the sea people, including the Philistines. They went on the sea, also crossed to Anatolia and then to Syria, to Egypt, to get food in Egypt. Actually, the main part of their stela is not devoted to the war with Canaan and Israel.
The Merneptah stela.
Merneptah.
Yeah.
It's not devoted to the war with... We are interested in the last 5 lines because it's about Canaan and about us, Israel. But the main text is about his war against invasion that came from the West. A strange coalition of sea peoples and tribes from Libya. I don't know what language they spoke, maybe with, hand signs or something like this. But they made a coalition and tried to get into Egypt from the West and capture all the food resources of Egypt. And Merneptah pushed them back. This is his main achievement. Only after he speak about Israel and the war with Israel.
And that's what he's remembered for, ironically.
Yes. And so people, if you remind of the Joseph story, it's a good thought, I would say, because all the lands are starving. There is only one land which has food, Egypt, probably because of the Nile, the water of the Nile. And we have documents from that period, Merneptah, son of Merneptah time, about shepherds from the land of Edom who are going down to Egypt because they have no food, no water, and the Egyptian accepts them and gives them water to drink to save their life.
Right.
But when you come as a shepherd to Egypt, we know this is mentioned in the book of Genesis. The Egyptians didn't like this occupation because the ram was admired as a symbol of the god Ammon. So you had to change your occupation. And if you
can't slay a ram.
Yes. No, it's not acceptable in Egypt. So you don't have a job. You need some food. Go and work in Pithom and Ramses, help Ramses to build his city.
Right.
This is some kind of realistic picture because the crisis already started in the last years of Ramses.
I see. Okay, let's move on to perhaps different clues, additional clues that we can find in the text. We have the hero of the Exodus story, Moses, which is interestingly not necessarily a Hebrew name. Moses, we have reason to believe, is actually an Egyptian name.
Yes. Yes, of course, in the story about Moses' birth, it is explained that the daughter of Pharaoh called him Moses because min hamayim meshitiu, I pull him out from the water. But this is a nice, I would say, late interpretation of the name.
We should explain the Hebrew word Moshe means to draw out of the water.
Yes, from the verb mashat, limshot.
But you see a different meaning here.
Yeah, the name Moshe, Moses, is known to us from many constructions of names, including the name Ramses. What is the meaning of Ramses? Ra is an important Egyptian deity, and the combination Ra-Moses means he was born out of Ra. Ra is his father. So, and then like this, you have the Pharaoh who conquered the land of Canaan in the 15th century was called Thutmoses. What is the meaning of Thutmoses? Thot is also another Egyptian god, and Moses means he was born to Thot. Probably Moses' name was also originally built of such a combination with some name of Egyptian deity and Moses. He was born to one of the Egyptian. Probably this is a sign that some kind of assimilation took place in the family of Moses.
Interesting.
Otherwise, they would not take such an Egyptian name.
Right.
Probably, we can think about Theodor Herzl, the great leaders of the Jewish people many times did not get strong Jewish education, I would say.
And Theodore becomes Benjamin, yes.
Yes.
Another clue, we have Moses later on in the story marrying a Midianite woman. Now, this is interesting because you have here the hero of the story. If this is a completely imaginary story, would we bother to pair up our hero with a foreign woman?
Yes.
This seems like an ordinary, very strange tale to tell.
Yes.
So does this also have the ring of authenticity?
Authentic, yes. One scholar, important scholar, said that the two original elements in the Moses story, most original, are his name and the fact that he married a Midianite wife. Right. And the issue of the Midianites and their religious, I would say, religious conceptions is extremely interesting, because probably this is also known from Egyptian documents. The land of Midian, who was in northwest Saudi of today, was an area where the god Yahweh was already worshipped before the time of Moses.
Right.
So the connection with wives that have father was the priest of the Midianites probably opened some religious knowledge to Moses.
This we know from certain Egyptian inscriptions?
Yes, they speak about the land of the Shasu wandering tribes of Yahweh in two documents, one from the time of Ramses II, the other 100 years earlier. And also, you know, the poems in the Bible describe God as marching from this area, from Seir, from Edom, from Midian. This is Song of Deborah, Blessing of Moses, Habakkuk 3. All these, they describe his appearance in the background of volcanic eruptions, which is exactly what we have in this area.
Right. I'll maybe quote from the Song of Deborah. Lord, when you went forth out of Seir, when you marched out of the field of Edom, the earth trembled, the heavens also dripped, also the clouds dripped water. So you mentioned this almost volcanic activity, a description in the land of Seir.
Yes.
And so there's maybe a hint you feel that the worship of God, the Hebrew God, actually comes from this region of Seir, which you identify with northern Saudi Arabia. Okay. And then there's, of course, the connection there between Jethro, who is the Midianite priest, and the worship of God. There's an interesting sort of dynamic there where it's almost as if Jethro is initiating Moses into the worship of God. He's the one who shows him the holy mountain there. So
probably.
So there seems to be some kind of clue here within the text that the Midianites are special. They know something already.
Yes. And they are later on coming with the Israelites. You mentioned they are calling Midianite and Canaanite. You mentioned the Song of Deborah. The Song of Deborah glorifies Yael, Eshet Hever Akeni. Yael, the wife of Hever the Canaanite. Canaanites are Midianites.
Interesting. So it's a connection that keeps popping up.
Yes.
Okay. Now, there is also a theory, and not only your own theory, but this theory states that in fact it was the tribe of Levi that was in Egypt. When you spoke of a smaller group being the one that went down to Egypt, you are a supporter of this theory that, in fact, we're talking about the Levites.
Yes. Why the Levites? I would say two things. First of all, there are several Egyptians names in the tribe of Levi, like Moses, which we have mentioned, Hophni and Pinchas, which are known from the time of Shiloh, the sons of Eli. And another names are probably in the tribe of Levi, not in other tribes, especially in Levi, are with Egyptian origins. The other thing is the name itself, Levi. What's the meaning of the name Levi? There is an Hebrew verb, lehilavot, which means to
accompany,
join,
to accompany.
To accompany.
Right.
So possibly, this is my suggestion, this group, as we made a calculation, those who came from Egypt came like 40 years after the main group.
Mm-hmm.
So they joined them later.
Right.
Probably for this reason, they did not get any share in the land because the land already distributed. So they became people of the cult because they couldn't be farmers.
Right.
The land was already, parted to each tribe.
So they were appointed priests in the temple.
And this is the meaning of the name Levi.
And there's another thing that you mentioned, the matter of the test at the springs. The test at the springs, at the waters of Massa and Meribah in the desert. Let's maybe remind our listeners of what exactly that is.
Again, we're going to old poems because the old poems, like the Song of Deborah, are probably the earliest texts within the Hebrew Bible. When I speak about text, I'm not insisting on writing. It could be formed, by heart.
Right.
Poetry can be, just formed without writing, and people are keeping it because, you memorize it. When I was in the age of 6 years old, I had to memorize 50 verses from biblical poetry, and I got a prize for my teacher at the end of Kita Aleph of the first grade. And I still remember it. So we are talking about the last poem within the Torah, the blessing of Moses in Deuteronomy 33, or for Jews who are following Parashat HaShavua, Parashat Vezot HaBracha.
Right.
And what is written there? וזאת הברכה אשר ברך משה איש האלוהים את בני ישראל לפני מותו. This is the blessing that Moses, the man of God, blessed the people of Israel before his death. And there is a blessing given to each tribe. And when we come to Levi, we see here a memory of a very strange and difficult scenario. What does Moses said to Levi? תומך ואורך לאיש חסידך, אשר ניסיתו במסע, תריבהו על מי מריבה סלע.
And I'll translate.
Yes.
And of Levi he said, let your Tumim and Urim be with your faithful one, whom you tested at Massa, challenged at the waters of Meribah. So he's speaking to this tribe of Levi.
Yes,
here.
and he speaks to them about an event that happened in nearest a spring, Massa and Meribah. In the biblical prose, in the book of Exodus, it is a location of a complaint against Moses because people of Israel didn't have water to drink.
Right. And in Exodus, we're talking about the whole people
All
complaining,
people of Israel.
not just Levi.
It is repeated in a different version at the book of Numbers, chapter 20. But in the old poem, this is not a place of water problem. The problem here is much more significant. Let us get the atmosphere of this poem. He says to the tribe of Levi, there was inner split within the tribe of Levi about a very serious issue, which broke families. האומר לאביו ולאמו לא ראיתיו, ואת אחיו לא הכיר, ואת בניו לא ידע, כי שמרו אמרתך ובריתך ינצרו.
Who said of his father and mother, I consider them not. His brothers he disregarded, ignored his own children. Your precepts alone they observed, and kept your covenant.
It means that in this split within the tribe of Levi, family were broken because part of the family was still loyal to the Brit, to the covenant with God, and followed his commandments. But it seems that the others broke the covenant and did not follow the commandment. Probably we are talking about the issue of idolatry. There was those who heard the commandment not to worship other gods and obeyed to it and were loyal to the covenant, and those who broke it and probably worship idols. So this is a split that happened on the way from Egypt to the land of Canaan, but the whole story is told as the only group that came out from Egypt and was on its way to Canaan are the tribe of Levi.
Right.
So those who kept the covenant got a precious gift and a reward. יורו משפטיך ליעקב ותורתך לישראל, ישימו כתורה באפיך וחליל על מזבחיך.
They shall teach your laws to Jacob and your instructions to Israel. They shall offer you incense to savor and whole offerings on your altar.
So unlike my explanation before that the tribe of Levi became cult servants because they came late and there were no possibility of being farmers, this blessing is saying that they were chosen to this sacred role because they proved their loyalty to God on the desert, on the time of the split in Massa and Meribah.
Okay. And we'll emphasize that you believe that because this appears in the song of the blessing of Moses, you believe that these songs, like the blessing of Moses, like the song of the sea in Exodus and the song of Dora in Judges and a few other examples, you believe that these are the oldest sections of the Bible, the nucleus.
Older. So the story was taken later by the biblical prose and was told on the background of the issue of the golden calf. And if you remember, already also there the Levites are mentioned and as those who were faithful and they were given the reward of becoming cult servants.
Right.
But there it is about the whole group of Israel, and it happened near Mount Sinai.
Right.
Here we have an older version. It was only about the tribe of Levi, and it did not happen in Mount Sinai, but rather near the spring of Massa and Meribah. This is the original, older version, I believe.
Okay. So that was all biblical evidence, let's call it. And now maybe we'll turn to things that we find outside of the Bible.
Yes.
For example, in Egyptian records.
Yes.
There is a figure who appears in the Egyptian records who is called Irsu.
Yes.
Who is Irsu?
Irsu can be a name, but no name like it is known to us. But Irsu can be also a pretender, one who wants a higher role than he deserves.
You mean it's a descriptive, almost a description rather than a name. It's not exactly clear.
Yes, it's not a name, but a description of the character and the activity of the person. And when does Irsu comes to the floor? This is in a difficult period. We spoke about Merneptah. When Merneptah died, his son Seti II came to the throne, and he married a woman who was called Tauseret, who was possibly his half-daughter, because this was the custom within the Egyptians.
What was done.
Yes. And the couple had a daughter, but the daughter died in a young age. We have her mommy. And no more children. So after Seti II passed away, Tausert became the queen of Egypt.
Right.
This is irregular, but she is not the first woman to go on the throne. We have the famous Hatshepsut before her.
Right.
So she ruled for several years, and then she passed away without having any descendant. So who will be the heir of the pharaonic throne?
Right.
This is a time of crisis.
Right.
So here we have the figure of Irso, who is mentioned by those who hated him, those who fought against him.
In Egyptian records, he's mentioned.
Yes.
As a negative figure. Right.
Negative figure.
And what does Irsu do?
If you combine the two sources, one is from the time of Setnechet, and the other one is from the time of his son. Together, Irso is said to try to take Egypt over, killing the holy animals. We spoke about the sanctity of the ram. There are other animals who were holy to the Egyptians, so he is blamed of killing some sacred animals. And he is also blamed to try to bring outside of Egypt support of soldiers outside of Egypt to help him to get the throne.
Right.
He is said to be not of Egyptian origins, but rather to be from Hur, which is Egyptian name to Canaan and Transjordan. So he probably originated, maybe not he himself, but his parents, from the land of Canaan.
Okay.
So Setnechet said, I defeated him. I've thrown him out, and I captured the gold and silver that he gave to those he wanted to help him from outside. He paid to soldiers to come and help him. I got the gold and silver that he paid them, and I drove him and his supporters outside of Egypt.
Interesting. So a very interesting account that sounds familiar in certain ways. This is from the Egyptian sources. And maybe in connection with this, we'll mention another account, also extra-biblical. It comes from much later, from a figure known as Manetho, who is an Egyptian priest living, like I said, much later in the early 3rd century BC, the Hellenistic period. And this Manetho writes an account which seems to refer to the same or similar events, though he refers to a figure called Osarseph, a renegade priest, he says, who tries to take over Egypt. There's a similarity. What is interesting about Manetho's account?
Well, also he blames this priest of killing the sacred animals, and also the blame that he was supported by people who were outside of Egypt, that he invited them to Egypt in order to help him ruling the country. and doing acts of injustice.
Right.
Okay, so also, and this is clearly an anti-Semitic elements, he said that he was a leper and all his group were lepers who were put together by the Pharaoh in one city.
Right. So we're talking about one of the first anti-Semites in history,
Yes,
Manetho.
that's true.
And we should mention that it's important because he later states that these lepers and this Osarsif, the Israelites later called him Moses.
Moses, yes.
He refers to the Osarsif
the
later being called Moses.
this leader, Isosoph, he was later called Moses.
This is according to
Moses
Manetho.
is a leper priest who was leading a group of lepers. Well, we can remember the story about Moses putting his hand, and the hand was with leprosy, and one of the signs that God gave him. But of course, this is some kind of very old anti-Semitic attitude of Egyptian priest in the 3rd century BC, as you said.
So both Manetho and the accounts regarding Yilsu mention these allies that are supposed to come from elsewhere and help this group which is trying to take over Egypt. Do you think it's possible that we are referring actually to those same Israelites who were in Canaan? Because we know that Merneptah was apparently...
this is possible. This is possible. What is very interesting is that if we look carefully in the biblical account, we have some hints for the same element.
Okay.
First of all, when the enslaving Pharaoh is talking, he says, "Hava nitchakma lo pen yirbe v'haya ki tikarena milchama v'nosaf gam hu al sonenu v'nilcham banu ve'ala min haaretz."
Let us deal shrewdly with them, so that they may not increase. Otherwise, in the event of war, they may join our enemies in fighting against us and rise from the ground. So he speaks of allies.
Yes, he speaks of allies. And also, if we read carefully the story, we have some hints about martial elements within the group of the Israelites. It is said, "V'chamushim yatzu bnei Israel me'eretz Mitzrayim." They went out from the land of Egypt with arms.
Equipped for battle, yes. In Exodus 13:18.
Yes.
Right.
So, and finally, I want to touch the very famous statement about the Erev Rav. And it is said, I'm reading from Exodus 12, 37 and 38, "Vayisu bnei Israel miRamses Sukkota, כי 600,000 רגלי הגברים לבד מטף, וגם ערב רב עלה איתם."
So I'll just translate. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, about 600,000 fighting men on foot, aside from non-combatants. Moreover, a mixed multitude went up with them, and very much livestock, both flocks and herds. So when you speak of Erev Rav,
Yes.
that's what is often translated in English as mixed multitude. But you basically explained that this is a mistranslation.
Yes, because the term Erev appears several times in other places in the Bible, especially in the prophetic books, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, as designation of a group of armed soldiers from mixed origins. This is the meaning of Erev,
Right.
who are going to help whoever pay them.
Meaning mercenaries.
Yes, that's true. This is the most, I would say, regular meaning of Erev in the Bible. So I suggest to read here or the people of Israel came from Egypt, 600,000 Ragli. These are the regular warriors, Ragli, and the number 600 is a number of military unit. We find it several times in the Bible.
600.
So, yes. So 1,000 units of infantry. This is the yes, and besides them also great group of mercenaries. This is what I would like to suggest. So the whole issue, it's not so much about miserable slaves, but
unarmed military conflict.
Yes, they tried to occupy Egypt, but they failed, and they were driven out by the new Pharaoh.
So how do you see the truth of this story then? Because the narrative speaks of an escape from slavery, and then perhaps there is some sort of confrontation just for the miracles, the crossing of the sea. We won't get into the miracles so much here. But do you believe that there was an actual military conflict here? You believe that there's enough clues to suggest that?
I think if I try to combine all the sources, and there is another issue that I have not yet mentioned, the issue of the sacred animals. What is Moses commanding the people of Israel to do before they go out from Egypt? The Passover lamb.
Right.
The lamb is a sacred animal for the Egyptians. So this is also can interpreted in light of the other sources. So what we have is, I would say, 3 groups of documents. 2 sources from the time of the Setenchet, namely the beginning of the 20th dynasty. It's about Tauser died in 1188, so probably a year or 2 after that. So we have the Elephantine Stela, which is from the 2nd year of Setenchet, together with the Harris Papyrus 20 years later. This is one group of sources. The other is the stories in Exodus. And the third one is Manetho. Everyone is coming from a different period with different interest. But yet there are common points in all 3 of them. So I would like to claim, it seems that there was something here. Is this tradition in complete contrast with the story of enslavement? I would say no. Because, it's a time of crisis. Nobody knows what to do. Who will be the next ruler of Egypt? Moses probably was not a slave. This is also according to the biblical story. He was raised in the palace. The name that he had is a clearly Egyptian name. So he could be a leader who raised outside of slavery, but then going to the group of slaves who are his, people. And because he was trained in the courts, he can, play politics and martial issues, getting gold and silver, which are also mentioned in the story, that the people of Israel borrowed gold and silver from the Egyptian. It is also mentioned in the story. So using some resources to try to get a support from outside group of soldiers, and we did, the combination of his brothers and the outside soldiers who possibly were also relatives, and together to sack the rulership of Egypt to become the new Pharaoh.
Interesting.
So Moses tried to become the new Pharaoh.
It probably did not succeed in that.
It did not succeed. And then he was expelled by the new Pharaoh, Setnechet, together with his helpers.
Fascinating. Okay, let's maybe conclude on, when we speak of the idea, the concept of something being experienced by a small group, for example, the tribe of Levi, and a story that is later adapted or adopted by an entire nation, we know that from several examples in history, but you often mention one in particular.
Yes, I mention Thanksgiving. I spent several years in my life in different American university. I taught at Harvard, at Berkeley, in Chicago. So it happened to me to be invited to Thanksgiving parties in the U.S. Once I was with relatives in New York who are, I would say, not exactly ultra-Orthodox, but on the line.
Okay.
And they celebrate Thanksgiving with a turkey. And why? Why my relatives in New York, who are between modern Orthodoxy and ultra-Orthodoxy, why do they celebrate Thanksgiving? Because of group of extreme, I would say, Protestants who were expelled from Europe, came with Mayflower to New England, and then they had this festival with turkeys, etc., etc. And all the American people are celebrating Thanksgiving. It is, once I happened to drive on Thanksgiving, I was in some conference and I went, everything is shut. You can't get anything.
No.
This is the festival that are observed by all Americans. It's amazing because the group that actually had this experience, it was so minor, and yet in a comparatively short time it became the story which is celebrated by whole American nation. So I would say, I believe that this is what happened with the Exodus story. It happened to a small group, to the Levites, but they were in a key position because they were the priests. So when, let's say, all the tribes of Israel are coming to Shiloh, they come for the festival, and the priest is telling them about the story of Exodus that happened to his group. But slowly it becomes a national story about salvation and redemption.
A good story is a powerful thing.
Yes.
Of course. Well, that's probably a great place to conclude our conversation. Professor
Yes.
Israel Knohl, thank you very much for being with us. This episode was filmed here at Nomi Studios in Jerusalem. Be with us next time.